Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex. A bit later than the Necron one, just because it's a little bit more difficult for me to do both of them at the same time with preparing all the stuff for visuals. So I'll be going through this, looking at the army rule, the detachments, and the data sheets, giving you a bit of my impressions on them and thoughts on how effective they are. With that, I also like to begin with a TLDR, just covering sort of big major changes I think here. Obviously, if there's any you think that are big and change, let us know in the comments. But with that, let's have a look at the TLDR. So on to the TLDR, what have we got here? Now, when it comes to detachments, we've got them sort of split up into sub-factions in a way. Two generalist ones, which sort of work for the AdMech force as a whole. One Skitarii focused one Cult Mech focused one, and one Kastelan one, I guess. Some of the stratagems do work for vehicles, but it is a bit more focused towards the Kastelans. In terms of detachment rules, I think they've largely improved the factions significantly, and a notable improvement. Now, that was not hard, considering where we were with the previous detachment rule, but yep, it is very impactful. The data sheets, I feel, have not changed significantly. There has been tweaks, and there has been notable parts that do make a difference. But I don't know if they're just quite enough for me to go, yeah, this pushes AdMech in the right place. So the detachments do that more than the data sheets do. Now, a big one here is that if you invested in Breachers before this, because they were very, very solid running into from the index to the codex, you'll be glad to know that's still quite a safe investment. Sometimes you will find when codexes come out, you've bought 30 models odd of, and you've painted them up and got them all ready, and then they're not useful. Breachers do still seem to be the case, that if you did use them before, they're going to largely work the same as before. So, good investment there, you'll be happy to hear that. Same can be said for the Necrons. They, unfortunately, some of their units did change a little bit too significantly. And so, as said, the Codex still feels very sub-faction-like. So you've got the Skitarii, Cult Mech, and now, arguably, the Legio Cybernetica. So, which is kind of cool in some ways. But when it comes to Legio Cybernetica, you really only have one unit and then putting on vehicles on top of it. Maybe they need to expand that part. The army still does not cause enough damage. And that's a key problem with the AdMech here, is that they just do not feel like they're hurting the opponent enough. There are ways to cause damage, don't get us wrong. Plenty of ways to do that, but just not quite enough and not as easily as you'd maybe want to. Now, I'd say the Codex makes up in a number of different ways, but obviously a key area in this game is causing damage. The army still largely benefits from ranged engagements over combat. Now that's really annoying to me because I used to run 6 Sydonian Dragoons in a unit and run up the field and smash everything, and I really quite liked combat AdMech, and it doesn't feel quite as rewarding in this codex. We are still rewarding ranged, so if you are playing ranged, great. There's plenty of choices in here. There's some combat as well, but it's just not quite there either. Dune Riders got a bit of a side grade. Lost advance and then deploy for smoke and helping deployed units cause damage. Very, very interesting one. Dune Riders seem to be that unit I've never played myself. I do have many of them to build and get ready. I've had them since 2020 and I've just not had time between other projects. But they're one of those ones that vehicles seem to be finding a bit of, well, transport seem to be finding a little bit of a use in the game. So certainly something to think about there, but you're not really advancing onto objectives so much than deploying your troops. You can maybe help them cause damage, and we'll maybe speak about that a wee bit later. The Datasmith and Kastelan fixed the strange infantry issue. That was very, very notable. And Force still has a number of deployment and speed units to play missions, and I feel that is probably their strength, is that you find the mission that you're going to play, you have the right units for the job, and they will do it well. I'd say now that AdMech certainly is a game for people who, don't want to say it this way, you have to think about what you're doing very, very carefully, even in casual games. You can't just point, click and kill. It's going to be a case of playing the mission, and if you play it smart, I think you'll be rewarded when it comes to AdMech. Looking into the Adeptus Mechanicus army rule, and we have doctrine imperatives, and largely they have not changed at all from what previous are, as far as I can see anyway. You've got your Protector and your Conqueror, and you choose at the start of the battle round which one you're going to go with. So, Protector, ranged weapons gain the heavy rules, if you stay still, a bit more accuracy, and then ranged attacks that target units within your deployment zone worsen their AP by 1, so your backfield units gain protection. Or Conqueror, in which case your ranged weapons get assault, and if you attack an opponent's unit that's in your opponent's deployment zone, you get a better AP. Now, I'd say this is decent for ranged AMEC players. Now, I think to make this actually impactful a bit more for ranged ones is that it should work on midfield objectives. Your opponent, whichever one, if you're on an objective in no man's land, you get this benefit as well, or if your opponent's on that one, you get this benefit as well. I think it just make it that little bit more impactful. But notably, there's nothing really for melee-focused Adeptus Mechanicus players here. It's largely when it's coming to range. There is, to a degree, but it's all dedicated towards range, and that's not really the best way to make a rule, I feel. AdMech is probably, looked at as quite a ranged focused force, but there is melee parts to it, and so I think that's lacking. Otherwise, I do find it is beneficial. There is ways to sometimes get both, and that can be a real help. Backfield units are going to survive more with Protector Imperative. Your forward ones, especially the Assault keyword, having that to be able to go onto objectives or score secondaries and essentially just play the mission a bit more is very, very impactful. So having that almost army-wide is excellent, very, very useful. So I don't think it's sometimes as bad as people think it is. I actually think it's quite good. It's just not what I want it to be. I want it to just be, frankly, to be beyond the deployment zones and also have melee impact. We have here our first detachment, and it is now the Rad-zone Corps. So this is largely the same as the previous Rad-zone one we had, but it has changed its name slightly and also changed its rules slightly. So it's a bit more impactful here that you are seeing that if a unit in the first round chooses to stand firm, they're going to suffer mortal wounds on a 3+, and then if they take cover, they could still suffer mortal wounds but also must take a battle shock test. Just a little bit less likely. And then we have Fallout, which is during the next couple of battle rounds, 3rd, 4th and 5th. Roll a d6 for each of the enemy's units in your opponent's deployment zone. On a 3+, they suffer mortal wounds and must take a battle shock test. So the key difference is that I feel certainly in both situations there is going to be more impact. There is going to be more mortal wounds just ticking away. Certainly on maybe your opponent's battlefield units that they just do not want you to really target at all. They're at least going to take some damage, but importantly they're going to get battle shock tests, and that could result in a lot of them. I just feel with this one is that there's going to be many forces that just will not care about this one too extensively. Obviously people, if they're playing a lot of their units in their backfield, they're either really ranged and don't want damaged, which will help there, or they're trying to hide them, in which case they won't like this at all. So, and then there'll be other forces, such as, I'd imagine, World Eaters, who just are going to pile on forward. They want to play for no man's land. They'll keep something on their backfield. They're going for sort of the midfield objectives. They're going for your objective. There is also playing objectives where you're playing the corners. That might be an impact as well. But really, I'd say this is improved. I don't know how I feel about it quite yet. I think if your opponent's smart, they can probably avoid it. But if your opponent has played for a particular strategy and this directly opposes it, it could really, really annoy them. Losing the chance of, if you've got battleship tests, losing the chance of using stratagems can really be impactful, possibly not controlling objectives. Yeah, really impactful that one side. But I just feel it's going to be super situational rather than something you can guarantee that can work. And on to the enhancements for the Rad-zone. We have Radio Suffusion, which Adeptus Mechanicus models only. From the second battle round onwards, when resolving the fallout effect for Rad Bombardment Detachment, you essentially get an extra 6 inches from your opponent's deployment zone, so it's extending that. Malphonic Surus, which gives the bearer and the unit leading it the stealth rule. Peerless Eradication gives the bearer and the unit sustained hits 1. Autoclavic Denunciation, which gives the bearer anti-infantry 2+ and anti-monster 4+. So in terms of these, Radial Suffusion I think is okay. Again, you're going to be extending the area your opponent has to think about when they are using their units. It's just putting a bit more pressure there, so I think depending on its cost could be quite useful. Malphonic Surus I think is still absolutely solid, giving stealth, great, probably on Breachers. Same with Peerless Eradication, great, sustained hits. You could probably put that on Breachers as well, or you could put them on any units, but Breachers are still a very good solid unit. And Autoclavic Denunciation is a weaker Omni Sterilizer, no longer near as consistent. You were used to be getting extra attacks, now you're not, and that just seems to impact quite a wee bit. If it's cheap, might be quite good. But again, I think when you see enhancements, most people would agree that you're looking to improve the unit rather than a leader's personal damage or survivability. There's sometimes go-to ones that are absolutely for the leader and will have an impact that way. So I'm not saying all of them are like that, but this one just doesn't feel like it's adding enough to overlook sort of making a unit better in itself. As for the Rad-zone Corps stratagems, we have Baleful Halo for 2 command points, Battle Tactic Stratagem. Used in the fight phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. 1 Adeptus Mechanicus unit from your army, excluding vehicles, that was selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. If that unit is battling, you can also target 1 friendly Skitarii unit, excluding battle line, within 6 inches. Till the end of the phase, each time an attack targets one of those units from your army, subtract 1 from the wound roll. Then we have Extinction Order, which is 1 command point, Strategic Ploy Stratagem. Using your command phase, target is 1 Tech Priest model from your army and 1 objective marker within 24 inches of that model. And roll a d6 for each enemy unit within range of that objective marker. The 4 plus that unit suffers 1 mortal wound and must take a battle shock test. So Baleful Halos seems to be a bit restrictive for 2 command points. Vehicles would be ideal for this. But it's also in the fight phase, which seems really odd. Your opponent may dictate sort of how the engagements sort of go there, where they're going to hit units, and it just might not seem ideal. -1 to wound is really good, but the caveat this is that you can't use vehicles. It gets its bonus if it's used on battle line, which you typically probably don't want to have -1 wound on. But I suppose you've got to think of it. Maybe you're getting the battle line free with the unit beside it if they are beside it, but yeah, I think it's just because it's in the fight phase, -1, not so ideal. But I guess that maybe you're just going to straight away just use this on your units that are going to be targeted in the fight phase. You're not going to worry about the battle line part of it. It's just going to be -1 to the wound rolls against them. Maybe a bit expensive 2 command points, but manipulating wound rolls is important. And then you've got Extinction Order. Now, it's a bit situational, obviously, depending on how your opponent is hunkered down onto objective markers. Can obviously cause a mortal wound, but also battle shock tests. I just find that battle shock tests, if you're going to drown your opponents in battle shock tests, cool, that might really work. But it's not quite reliable. If your opponent has some real strong stratagems they're depending on, then yeah, this might be very, very impactful. You might want to think about bringing units who manipulate your opponent's leadership in order to make this go off a bit more successfully. Aggressor Imperative for 1 command point, Battle Tactic Stratagem. Using your movement phase, 1 Skitarii unit from your army that has not been selected to move this phase. If that unit is battle line, you can also target another Skitarii unit, including battle line within 6 inches. And essentially, instead of rolling to advance normally, you add 6 to your movement characteristic instead. Pre-calibrated Purge Solution, which is 1 command point, Battle Tactic Stratagem. Using your shooting phase, 1 Adeptus Mechanicus unit from your army is the target that has not been selected to shoot this phase. If that unit's battle line, you also can target another Skitarii unit, excluding battle line, within 6 inches. And until the end of the phase, each time model in one of those units makes a ranged attack. If the target is within your opponent's deployment zone, you can re-roll the hit roll. So Aggressor Imperative, very, very good for mobility. I feel if you are going to be going along Conqueror, then that just gives you assaults. You can either fire or you can either start playing objectives. Very, very good. Pre-calibrated, not going to be impactful in Breachers, your sort of go-to unit. But say you've got Ironstriders or anything like that that could do with the rerolls to hit. Absolutely possible in there as well. And because it's going to be targeting your opponent's deployment zone, then that again will be quite handy in Conqueror Imperative as well, because you obviously will get the AP difference as well. Lethal Dosage for 1 command point is a War Gear Stratagem. Using your shooting phase, 1 Adeptus Mechanicus unit from your army that has not selected to shoot this phase. Until the end of the phase, their ranged weapons get lethal hits. And Bulwark Imperative for 2 command points, which is a Battle Tactic Stratagem. In your opponent's shooting phase, just after an enemy unit has selected its targets, 1 Skitarii unit from your army that was selected as target of attack, or if it was battle line, you can target another one of your Skitarii units, excluding battle lines within 6 inches. Until the end of phase, models in those units gain 4 up invul saves. Lethal Dosage I think is great. It's going to be super useful in a number of situations. High volume, below chance to wound, so lots of shots, below strength. Yep, just get a lot more of those hits into wounds, which is very, very handy, especially if you've got reroll to hits, which Breachers do. To a degree, you can give some of your Skitarii units as well, I suppose, if you want to take the leader to do so. Affordable at 1 command point, certainly just to pile on extra damage. Bulwark Imperative, 4-up invul save will depend on really the AP of your opponent's weapons, but also are you using Protector Imperative, effectively. If you are, then you might find that you might not even get to the 4-up invul stage where it will be useful, and a number of equals do also come with a 4-up invul save as well. Well, certain units come with 5-up invul saves, I don't think too many come up 4-up. It might be a bit expensive at 2 command points. I know it's got the potential of actually affecting 2 units, one of them being Battle Line. I'm not too sure if 2 command points is maybe worth this one. 1 command point would certainly probably something to think about. 2, possibly not. Next we have the Skitarii Hunter Cohort, which detachment rule is called Stealth Optimization. That's kind of your Skitarii rule, if you will, your Skitarii detachment. Skitarii Infantry, Skitarii Mounted, and Ironstrider Ballistarii units from your army have the Stealth ability, and each time a ranged attack targets a Sicarian unit from your army, unless the attacking model is within 12 inches, the target has the benefit of cover against that attack. So this affects a number of units: Sydonian Skatros, Skitarii Marshal, Skitarii Rangers, Vanguard, Sicarian Infiltrators, Sicarian Ruststalkers. Is it Pteraxii or Pteraxii Skystalkers? I've always wondered. I'm going to say Pteraxii for now, but correct me if I'm wrong in this. You might hear this wrong a few times then. Sterylizors, Serberys Raiders, Serberys Sulphurhounds, and Ironstrider Ballistarii. So an interesting detachment this is that stealth is a good rule, and having the benefit of cover as well overall is not bad. You can get benefit of cover quite easily depending on how your battlefield is laid out. But certainly just having stealth army-wide is really impactful, or at least for the Skitarii side. It can be hard countered by certainly melee aggressive builds, so if your opponent is planning to just bully you off the field and just get into combat with you, not really going to be as impactful. And but equally, if you are playing against armies like Tower Ashtar, this is going to pay off absolutely significantly. It helps when it comes to Adeptus Mechanicus survivability when you are going to be playing for ranged attacks, and the thing is that I just say that because the Adeptus Mechanicus is lacking in damage, this is going to force you to really play a battle of attrition. You're going to have to be careful with your positioning, how you're playing out in served turns, where you're going to end up. Rather than thinking, how am I going to remove X unit, you're maybe thinking, how am I going to either lock that unit down, or how am I going to survive this unit? And stealth certainly does help with that. On to their enhancements, we have the Kinetic Thrall Net, which is Skitarii Marshal model only. At the start of the battle round, you can select one friendly Skitarii unit within 12 inches of the bearer. Till the start of the next battle round, the Protector Imperative and Conquer Imperative are active for that unit. Clandestine Infiltrators, Skitarii model only. The bearer and models in the unit they are leading have Infiltrators and Scout 6. Veiled Hunter, Skitarii Marshal model only. Both players have deployed their army and determined to choose first turn. Select up to 3 Skitarii infantry unit from your army and redeploy all of those units. When doing so, any of those units can be placed in strategic reserve, regardless of how many units are already in strategic reserve. Battlesphere Uplink, Skitarii model only. In a shooting phase after the bearer's unit is shot, it is not within engagement range of one or more enemy units. That unit can make a normal move up to 6 inches. If it does so, until the end of the turn, it can't make a charge. So in these ones, I think generally they're quite good. Kinetic, I think, is very good. You do need to think about how you're going to play it. So if you're, say, going to have Rangers in the backfield sticking an objective, and you've got your Marshal nearby, then yeah, you could use him to maybe benefit some of your better units in the backfield, looking at your Dune Crawler, your Breachers, your Ironstrider, and so that they can benefit from, say, the protection of being in deployment zone, but possibly target units in your opponent's deployment zone and really get the benefit of both. That'd be quite handy in that situation. Clandestine Infiltrator is good because, as I was saying about AdMech, you really need to think about how, making clever moves to try and stop your opponent, but also be in the right place. Is that this will allow you to essentially infiltrate close to your opponent, then scout straight into their line and put a blob of units to really try and stop them from being able to move turn 1. Or your opponent will have to move around them, or just think about it. Just might work as a blob that your opponent will have to move around and not be too happy about. So I think generally that one can be quite handy to manipulate your opponent's turn 1. Veiled Hunter, so that one I do believe, if it's affordable, is going to be useful enough. just going to be situations where, you know, you're going to want to try and change up where your units are going to be. Think about how they are actually going to move. You see your opponent's deployment, because this is determined after who has the first turn. You can go, right, I know who's going first. I want to change this unit's position so that it's more effective later on. Or it's because you're not getting first turn, you just want to change it up. Totally doable. So very, very good. And then Battlesphere Uplink, super useful ability. Just, I don't know if the Skitarii models themselves can join the units that are going to most benefit from it, which is disappointing. You're going to see that with a few sort of things that happen, that there might be really good abilities. Just, I don't know if this is either the unit that can take it, or even the army is the best for such an ability. Skitarii Hunter Cohort Stratagems. We have Bionic Endurance for 1 command point. It's a strategic deploy stratagem. Use this in your opponent's shooting or fight phase just after an enemy has selected its targets, and you can choose one Sicarian, Pteraxii or Sydonian unit that has been selected as a target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. To the end of the phase, models in that unit have a 5-up feel no pain. Then Harrowcroft Offense, which is 2 command points, strategic deploy stratagem. Until the start of your shooting phase or the start of the fight phase, 2 Skitarii units from your army that have not been selected to shoot or fight this phase, and 1 enemy unit. To the end of the phase, improve the armor penetration characteristics of weapons equipped by models in both of your units by 1. To the end of phase, each time model in either of those units, they must attack the chosen unit, and only if it's an eligible target. So yeah, I feel Endurance is really, really good. 5-up feel no pain, excellent on Sydonian units. That might actually be a little bit too much of a bargain. Just to improve their defensive abilities significantly, making them a very difficult unit to move. And then the offense one, I think, is not bad. You know, it is 2 command points, so you know, a bit more expensive, but you are improving the AP of 2 units and allowing you to focus down on 1 unit. And certainly, I believe that Skitarii units, there are viable ones that they can use this to really focus someone down. Expedited Purge Protocol for 1 command point, strategic deploy stratagem. Using your charge phase on 1 Skitarii unit from your army. Until the end of the phase, that unit can charge even though advanced. And Isolate and Destroy for 1 command point, strategic deploy stratagem. Using your shooting phase, 1 Sicarian, Pteraxii, Sydonian, Ironstrider Ballistarii or Skitarii mounted unit from your army that has not selected to shoot this phase. To the end of the phase, each time model in your unit makes an attack, if there's no other enemy units within 6 inches of the unit that you targeted, add 1 to the wound roll. Expedited Purge Protocol, always useful to have advance and charge, just to allow you to get into positions you need to be able to charge, or do actions to score secondaries. And Isolate and Destroy, +1 to wound is always good. Manipulating the wound roll, very, very ideal. It's also cheap at 1 command point. The prerequisite can be stopped by your opponent by moving more units next to each other, but that's also now removing their positioning. So I think this is really, really, really good. You know, find that, you know, there's enemy units that are trying to score points, eliminate them. Tough units, eliminate them. Just +1 wound, really good. 1 command point, excellent. Shroud Protocols for 1 command point, strategic deploy stratagem. You're using your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. Target 1 Skitarii infantry unit from your army that is selected as the target of 1 or more of the attacking unit's attacks. Until the end of the phase, your unit can only be selected as the target of a ranged attack if the attacking model is within 12 inches. And programmed withdrawal for 1 command point, strategic deploy stratagem. Using the end of your opponent's fight phase, up to 2 Sicarian units from your army or 1 Skitarii infantry or Skitarii mounted unit from your army. Remove those from the battlefield and place them in strategic reserve. Each unit targeted with a stratagem must be more than 3 inches away from all enemy units. So Shroud is a great way to deny your opponent from destroying a unit or damaging it, especially if it's currently scoring. And Withdrawal is possibly very cheap, considering 2 units in a bad position might have a chance to redeploy and go somewhere else. You know, you don't want them on one side of the field, get back into a place that is more appropriate. So again, I can see absolute use for both these stratagems, and both very good at 1 command point. Next detachment is Data Psalm Conclave, and that will be the detachment rule of Benedictions of the Omnissiah. So, at the start of the first battle round, select one of the following Benedictions of the Omnissiah to be active for the Cult Mechanicus units from your army until the end of the battle. And you've got Panegyric Procession. Each time a Cult Mech model from your army makes a range attack, that targets a unit within half range. improve the AP characteristic of the attack by 1, and citation in savagery. Each time a cult mech unit from your army is selected to fight, if that unit made a charge move this turn, at the end of the phase, add 1 to strength and attack characteristics of melee weapons equipped by models in that unit. And this affects Belisarius Cawl, Tech Priest Dominus, Tech Priest Enginseer, Tech Priest Manipulus, Technoarcheologist, Kataphron Breachers, Kataphron Destroyers, Corpuscarii Electro-Priests, and Fulgurite Electro-Priests. So, this appears to be the sort of cult mech side of Doctrinas, though we do have a couple of cult mech units that do get Doctrinas as well. Fair enough, it's Kataphrons. Really, those Breachers are paying out quite well. I find this a very messy method of doing sub-factions. You know, you've got Drukhari with their... You've got your Witches and your Kabbalites, etc. And then you've got Chaos Demons with all the various Chaos Demons. Makes me a bit worried for them in the future. Are we going to get sort of their detachments are going to be just focused on their specific sub-faction? I find that highly likely, but I really hope there is ones that do combine the whole army across as well, because ultimately that is, I feel in some ways, limited in the range. I think I might have actually liked this to actually be part of the army rule in itself, that AdMech units get this and Skitarii get their imperatives. That's how it used to be, and it's not the case anymore. And I suppose in terms of keeping it simple, yeah, that might be the case. Now, do I like this? Yeah, I do. I think both are handy. It's a bit of a shame that, again, not like the Conqueror, the Doctrinas, you can't choose which one you want at the start of the battle round. It's one of them, and it affects the rest of the game. So it's going to be how are you building up your army on this one. I think that it does help just about all of them especially well. Citation and Savagery certainly builds your combat units up significantly if they're on the charge. The Pangeric Procession, very good if you're on half range. I think if you're going to play this one, you're going to have to certainly tailor your list to get the most out of it. But I do think it is not a bad one, just need to be very, very careful about what you use. Next is the Data Sam Conclave's enhancements. We have Mechanicus Locum, which goes in Tech Priest models only. The bear has a leadership characteristic of 6+, and once per battle, at the start of any phase, you can select one friendly cult mech unit from that is battle shocked, and within 12 inches of the bearer, that unit is no longer battle shocked. Mantle of the Geoniskark. I'm not even going to try. I've tried and probably murdered that. Someone can correct me. Tech Priest model only. Each time an attack is allocated to the bearer, change the damage characteristic of that attack to 1. Data Blessed Auto Sermon. Tech Priest model only. Once per battle at the start of the command phase, select the Benediction of the Omnissiah. Do not select at the start of the first battle round. So at the start of your next command phase, the Benediction of the Omnissiah is active for the bearer's unit, in addition to one that is currently active for your army. And then Temporor Tech Priest model only, the bearer's unit has the Fight First ability. Now when it comes to these ones, the Mechanicus Locum I think is okay to unbattle shock a unit. That could force them to then need to contest an objective, use stratagem, etc. Fine. Mantle of the, I'm not even going to pronounce it, Fantastic Relic, but I just feel no AdMech unit is really going to utilise it the best. Give you protection against snipers, but really there'd be many armies that would love an ability like that. This kind of isn't really one of them. Data Blessed, frankly, should be for the duration of the battle, or every battle round you can select a new one within 12 inches to be more impactful. I think this is fine, but it's just missing something there to really make it a standout enhancement. And Tempocorpia, which is Fight First, one of the best abilities in the game. I think it'd be good on, say, a Datasmith with Fight First to Kastelan Robots. And we have our stratagems, which the first one is Incantation of Iron Soul for 1 command point. It's a battle tactic stratagem. Use this in any phase just after you've allocated a mortal wound to a cult mech model from your army. And until the end of the phase, cult mech models in that unit have a 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. Enchant of Remorseless Fist for 1 command point is a battle tactic stratagem used in the fight phase, and you use it on one cult mech unit that has not fought yet. At the end of the phase, each time that cult mech model in that unit makes a melee attack, add 1 to the wound roll. So Incantation, I think it's going to be very useful in case you're facing mortal wound heavy armies. That's going to be your psychic armies potentially, or one that does focus on those mortal wounds. Going to be a bit of protection there. The Enchant, again, very solid way to get +1 to wound. The stipulations being in melee, which I think there is certainly units that can do so. So yeah, that can be great in that way as well. So again, affordable for 1 command point. Burst of Vengeance for 1 command point, Strategic Deploy Stratagem. Use in the fight phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. And you use that on 1 cult mech unit from your army that's selected as the target of 1 or more of the attacking unit's attacks. And this is your sort of standard. You get to fight if you get destroyed, and you roll a dice on a 4+, you don't get removed. You can then fight after the opponent's fights. Then we've got Tribute of Emphatic Veneration, 1 command point, Strategic Deploy Stratagem. Use it in your movement phase. Targets 1 cult mech unit from your army and 1 enemy unit within 18 inches of it. And the effect is that enemy unit must take a Battleshock test. If the test has failed until the next command phase, each time model in that enemy unit makes an attack, subtract 1 from the hit roll. So I'm not the biggest fan of this sort of you can fight after death, and especially when it's on a 4+ to actually activate. Really, for even 1 or 2 command points, I'd want that to activate on a 2+ at most, at least 3+. But really, if you're going to spend command points on it, you really want that to actually just activate, and then your opponent is going to suffer damage because they're inflicting damage on you. And then Tribute is affordable, but again, you're depending on dice roll of your opponent. If they have been suitably debuffed in leadership, that's going to be okay. But really, because it has the stipulation of it has to be 1 enemy unit within 8 to 18 inches, so it is you have to be close by sort of a stratagem. I'd frankly wouldn't mind if it was something a little bit more, just -1 to hit, or if they are going to take a Battleshock test, -1 to hit and possibly -1 to wound as well. Litany of the Electromancer for 1 command point, Strategic Deploy Stratagem, using your shooting phase. It targets 1 cult mech unit from your army. Roll 1d6 for each enemy unit within 6 inches of 1 or more cult mech models in your unit, adding 1 to the result if they are an Electro-Priest unit. On a 5+, that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. Luminescent Blessings, 1 command point, Battle-Tactic Stratagem. Use in your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. 1 cult mech unit from your army can be selected as the target of that, and until the end of the phase, they have a 4-up invul save. So Litany has a huge amount of potential for a large amount of mortal wounds. So your enemy's using multiple small units in a big battle, you activate this, 1 command point, could be potential of more wounds. Luminescent Blessing is interesting. 4-up invul is fine, possibly best used on Breachers to give them, further protection. Interesting that the Luminescent Blessing is just a straight up 4-up invul save versus the Bulwark Imperative, which is 2 command points. Sure, it's a 4-up invul save, but it's double the cost, and you can get 2 units out of it, but yeah, it just seems a bit odd on that one. I feel maybe Cult Mech 4-up invul save's not as important, but just feels odd on that side. That the fact that the Bulwark is 2, really, that one should be just 1, and it's a nice bonus if you get a battle line unit on top of it. And on to the next detachment, which is Explorator Maniple, possibly my favourite name of the detachment so far. Detachment rule is acquisition at any cost. At the start of your command phase, select 1 objective marker. To the start of your next command phase, that objective marker is your acquisition objective marker. Each time an Adeptus Mechanicus model from your army makes an attack, if that model's unit is within range of your acquisition objective marker, or if the target of the attack is within range of your acquisition objective marker, reroll a wound roll of 1. Very nice damage buff for AdMech, and sorely needed. How this works is changing every battle round as well, making it much more viable. If this had been you have to choose at the start of the battle and it never change, I could see this being almost worthless, so they did make it much more impactful that way. I would say you can play this in different ways. You can play in the backfield on your deployment zone objective, and that way your backfield units can benefit from it. Even in the mid game, your opponent puts difficult units to move from an objective, you can put this on, suddenly you're rerolling 1 to wound, and then you have a chance to hurt them. On to the Explorer Maniple's enhancements, we have Magos, that will be on Tech Priest models only. At the end of your command phase, if the bearer is within range of an acquisition objective marker, roll a d6. On a 4+, you gain 1 command point. Genitor, which is Tech Priest model only. While the bearer is leading a unit that is within range of your acquisition objective marker, models in that unit have a 4-up invul save. Logos, Tech Priest model only. While the bearer is leading a unit, each time model in that unit makes an attack that targets a unit within range of acquisition objective marker, add 1 to their hit roll. Artisan, Tech Priest model only, while the bearer is leading a unit that is within range of your acquisition objective marker. Once per phase you can change the result of 1 hit, 1 wound, or 1 saving throw for the unit to an unmodified roll of 6. So one thing I'm going to caveat all these with is that they all need to be near your acquisition objective marker, and that massively changes how useful it is when you are going to be able to move that acquisition objective marker, because in order to benefit from these you are stuck to a very small area, and I don't like that. I don't mind it if there was maybe an ability and then it gets better if you're near your acquisition objective marker, or the ability was straight up amazing. So to give you an idea of that, the CP farm is almost always an auto take just to get those extra command points. But what if it was 4 up to get a command point, and then 2 up if within range of your acquisition objective marker? How much better would that be? Janitor, again, very, very useful for 4 up pinball save. Maybe it should be 5 up normally, then becomes 4 up if you're near your acquisition objective marker. 5 up's maybe not as impactful, and frankly might not help some units because they already have it. And then Logos, which is +1 hit, but it's got to be against the unit that is on your acquisition objective marker going against them. So essentially getting +1 hit, and then you reroll wound rolls of 1. Again, +1 hit, maybe full rerolls if targeting the unit on your acquisition objective marker. And Artisan, very useful on breachers in the backfield. Just something to get that extra reroll. Maybe if you're on your acquisition objective marker, it'd be 1 hit, 1 wound, and 1 saving throw in that bearer's unit during a turn or something like that. Just I feel there should have been, an ability you get and a reward for being on the acquisition objective marker, rather than just going, it's only going to work in the acquisition objective marker. That's a bit of a pain when it comes to this Explorator Maniple. And their stratagems, and we've got cached acquisition for 1 command point. It's an epic deed stratagem. Use in any phase 1 Adeptus Mechanicus unit from your army that was just destroyed while it's within range of an objective marker you controlled. You can use this the stratagem even if the unit was destroyed. Essentially that objective marker stays under your control until your opponent ends up controlling it themselves. And priority reclamation, which is 1 command point, battle tactic stratagem. Using the fight phase just after an Adeptus Mechanicus unit from your army consolidates, and they can end up actually consolidating 6 inches provided that they move within your acquisition objective marker. And you cannot target a unit with this stratagem if it's within 3 inches or more of 1 or more enemy units. So cash stratagem is great and affordable. I think that's going to be very much a go-to. You lose a unit, great, I'm going to keep this objective under my control. And also handy in the fight phase because your opponent's probably on that objective. Certainly if your unit is shot off, then something to consider. Priority reclamation is useful, just it has that acquisition criteria, and that really reduces effectiveness significantly. Info Slave Skull for 1 command point. It's a war gear stratagem. Using your command phase and target 1 Tech Priest model from your army and 1 objective marker within 24 inches of that model, excluding already your acquisition objective marker. Till the start of your next command phase, the objective marker is also considered to be one of your acquisition objective markers for all rule purposes. And then we've got Auto Oracular Retrieval, which is 2 command points, Battle Tactic Stratagem. Using your shooting phase and use it on one of your AdMech units from your army that disembarked from a transport. Until the end of the phase, each time model in that unit makes ranged attack that targets an enemy unit within range of acquisition objective marker, add 1 to the wind roll. So I think Info Slave is going to be a staple way to activate abilities that you've got that require the acquisition objective marker on rerolls, so 1 command point, quite good. Auto Oracular, so that's a bit of an odd one. It's +1 to wound, which is usually traditionally great. Not a big fan of it being 2 command points, but when it has no stipulations, I'm okay with that. This comes with 2. One, you've got to come out of a transport, and secondly, you've got to target a unit that is on near your acquisition objective marker. That's very situational, and I don't feel the command points are really reflecting that. Incense Exhausts for 1 command point, War Gear Stratagem. Using your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. Use on 1 Adeptus Mechanicus infantry unit from your army that was selected as the target of 1 or more of the attacking unit's attacks, and 1 friendly Adeptus Mechanicus smoke unit within 6 inches. Until the end of the phase, both of these units have stealth and benefit of cover. Active Safeguard, which is 1 command point, Strategic Ploy Stratagem. We use it in your opponent's charge phase just after any unit has declared a charge. one Adeptus Mechanicus model infantry unit from your army within range of the acquisition objective marker that was selected as the target of the charge, and one friendly Adeptus Mechanicus transport, you can embark within that transport. The restriction is every model in that unit must be within 3 inches of the transport, and there must be a sufficient transport capacity to embark the entire unit. So incense, great way to hunker down an objective with transport, and reactive is going to force an unfavourable charge to possibly redirect. So you have an anti-infantry unit charge your infantry, cool, we're now in the vehicle, you're not going to get us, just makes it harder for, these are really designed about getting Dune Riders and probably infantry in them, get them either protected by, having stealth and benefit of cover, or by getting them back in the vehicle and getting out of dodge. Both really good stratagems for their cost. And on to the last detachment, we have the Cohort Cybernetica. This detachment rule is Cyber Sam Programming. And this is going to affect Legio Cybernetica units from your army. They gain Doctrina Imperative Army Rule. This really only impacts Cybernetica Satasmith and Kastelan Robots. I think this is frankly far too restrictive. I don't think the Kastelan Robots really need to have Doctrina Imperatives. And I'd probably say there's other detachments such as the Exploration Maniple which would benefit them more. To make it more worth it, you simply need to have more Legio Cybernetica units or Admech take. Now if you add 3 to 4 units, different types, different roles, then yeah, this might actually be worth it. But so far we only really have one type of robot, and it's simply not really a great detachment. And their enhancements, we have Necromechanic, which is on Tech Priest mod only, once per battle round when saving throw is made for a Legio Cybernetica or Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle model within 12 inches of the bearer's field. The bearer can use this enhancement. If they do, the damage characteristic of the attack is 0. Lord of Machines, Tech Priest model only, once per turn. At the start of your opponent's shooting phase, select one enemy vehicle unit within 12 inches of an invisible to the bearer. The unit must take a leadership test. If that test is passed, to the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, subtract 1 to hit. If the test has failed, then that unit is not eligible to shoot at all. Motionless Clarity, Tech Priest model only, once per turn, while a friendly Legio Cybernetica or Admech vehicle with a deadly demise ability that's in 12 inches of the bearer is destroyed. The bearer can use this enhancement. If it does, do not roll to determine whether any mortal wounds are inflicted as a result of the model's deadly demise ability. Instead, mortal wounds are automatically inflicted. An Arch Negator Tech Priest model only, Arch Negator used on Tech Priest model only. Ranged attacks equipped by the bearer have the anti-vehicle 4+ ability. So Necromechanic, excellent, fantastic way to protect your robots or your vehicles. Near enough an auto take on that one. Lord of Machines, also very good, where if test is passed, then fine, you have a debuff. That's part of the enhancement. But if you fail it, then there's an extra debuff. That is something I really, really like. It should be more, here's an effect that's pretty good, and here's a major effect if this is achieved. So this one feels quite the right amount of balance there. Motionless Clarity, the range on this one is a little bit restrictive, but I can potentially see if you get into the right position with a vehicle and it gets destroyed, a lot of mortal wounds. An Arch Negator, some potential of dev wounds on Volkite Blaster and Transonic Cannon, but simply not the one that, not a sort of go-to war gear enhancement that really makes a danger unit particularly, or at least not as far as I see. And the Cohort Stratagems, you have Motive Imperative for 1 command point. It's Battle Tactics Stratagem, which you use in your command phase, and it's on 1 Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle unit from your army. Until the start of your next command phase, add 3 to move characteristics of models in your unit and add 1 to advance and charge rolls for it as well. Auto Divinator for 1 command point, Battle Tactics Stratagem, used in your command phase, and on 1 Legio Cybernetica or Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle unit from your army and 1 objective marker. Till the start of your next command phase, ranged weapons equipped by models in your unit have less skill characteristic of 3+, and they ignore cover ability, but they can only target units within range of a selected objective marker. So Motive Imperative, interesting that the Kastelan Robots do have vehicles, keyword as far as I can see there, so they are targetable list. So essentially +4 to your advance or charge roll. Essentially, you get +3 to your movement, and then your charge is a bit easier, so really good even on a vehicle to try and stuck down and hold down a unit. Auto Divinator, very solid for 1 command point, if not just a little bit overcomplicated, but it does add, if you are using specifically shooting units, you're going to get ignore cover, 3+ save, make it a bit more accurate. Not bad for 1 command point, just a shame AdMech in general are not stealth 3, bliss skill 3+. Machine Spirit Resurgent, 1 command point, it's an epic deed stratagem, using your command phase. And the target is 1 Legio Cybernetica or Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle unit from your army that is below starting strength. So your next command phase, each time model in that unit makes an attack, you can reroll a hit roll, and if they're below half strength, you can reroll a wound roll as well. The Machine Superiority, which is 1 command point, it's an epic deed stratagem. Used in your command phase, and targets 1 Legio Cybernetica or Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle unit from your army. Till the end of the turn, your unit is eligible to shoot in a turn in which fell back and can ignore any and all modifiers to characteristics and or to roll tests made for that unit, excluding saving throws. And what I'd say about that one is Resurgent. Yeah, that can be good though. It's a perfect spot where you might be under half strength but not suffering -1 to hit, and that way you're getting all your reroll hit and wounds, so there's a real nice place there. And then Superiority, which is if you're in a dangerous situation, you can consider getting out of dodge. Has 2 benefits as well, which is not bad, considering it's quite cheap at 1 command point. And the last stratagems, we have Transcendent Cognition, which is 1 command point, strategic ploy stratagem, using your command phase. 1 Legio Cybernetica or Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle unit from your army. To the start of your command phase, the Conqueror and Protector imperative are both active for your unit. You have Benevolence of the All-Messiah, 1 command point, it's an epic deed stratagem. Using your command phase, it targets 1 Legio Cybernetica or Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle from your army. The effect is that until the start of your next command phase, models in that unit have a 6-up Feel No Pain, and it's improved to 5-up if it's against mortal wounds. So Transcendent, I think, is going to be not bad. You can use it on vehicles as well, so if you're in your deployment zone, you get a defense bonus. Target an enemy in their deployment zone to get the benefits of both. The Benevolence is fine for 1 command point, not the biggest fan of 6-up Feel No Pain, but the 5-up against mortals will have its use against certain targets. So that is it for all the detachments. I think I'll just give you a quick summary of my thoughts when it comes to all the detachments. So Rad-zone Corps detachment is greatly improved, and I think it's going to be far more impactful when it comes to the actual game. Just really dependent on your opponent. If they're looking at melee focused forces, they're just going to run on forward through the field, probably not going to affect them as much. Enhancements are fine. There's some very good ones, and stratagems, however, are a bit messy with their interactions with battlefields units. Enhancement highlights are Malphonic Surus and Peerless Eradicator, and then stratagem highlights are Aggressor Imperative, Pre-calibrated Purge Solution, and Lethal Dose. And the Skitarii Hunter Cohort. Stratagem rule favours when you're against ranged armies, so Astra and Tal will hate it, but non-ranged armies will not be impacted so much. Enhancements are generally very good, but the stratagems are an absolute highlight, really, really good. The enhancement highlights are Kinetic, Thrallnet, Clandestine Infiltrator, and Veiled Hunter. The stratagems, I'm just going to put all of them I could see use of, which is, I suppose that's the best way to actually have stratagems. If you can viably see a way for all of them, then that's a well written actual detachment. When you go, yeah, this is good because it's got 4 good ones out of 6, that's a fine one, but this one, all of them I can see an actual use of. Data Sam Conclave, the detachment rule rewards Cult Mech, which is good. However, I preferred if it was just part of the army rule, so that the army rule didn't feel like it was just working on range units within that's essentially Skitarii. They have to have the actual rule. I'd have preferred if this was a bit in the past where they had a rule each, and it did play an effect, but it does not. And I also feel that choosing between melee and ranged is not ideal, frankly, because it's a bit restrictive on the amount of units. Should have probably just had both, and they just go throughout the game. Enhancements and stratagems I just felt were lackluster, and if you're really going to make this a bit more of a thing, you need to probably add more actual cult mate units with different roles. In terms of enhancements, Terpcorpia was a highlight, and then the stratagems Chant of Remorseless Fist and Litany of the Electromancer were pretty good as well. And then Explorator Maniple, so the detachment rule is very adaptive, which I really like. You can change the position of your acquisition objective marker every battle round and add some damage for AdMech. And the enhancements to stratagems are good, but they've got too much caveats on them that are you need to be near or benefit from your acquisition objective marker, and that's not ideal because it just adds way too many caveats that just don't make them useful in certain situations, versus other forces in this do have their stratagems and enhancements work nearly at all times. I feel this should have been very much, you have a minor ability, then you have a major ability if you are targeting the acquisition objective marker, a unit on it or near it, one of your own or your opponents. That's how I would have done this one to make it far, far more appealing. I still think it's actually quite good though, all said and done. So in enhancement highlights, I think Magos, Genitor and Arsan are all good. There's an argument to say all of them could be excellent. In the stratagem highlights, Cached Acquisition, Infoslave, Incest, Exhaust, and Reactive Safeguard, all very good as well. Lastly, the Cohort Cybernetica. Simply, it's too restrictive. That just has the robots. Really, you need to add, more robots to the army to fill it out a wee bit, or should have had a bonus for vehicles as well. And then we'd really start talking a bit more about this detachment being a little bit more useful. Good thing is the stratagems do affect vehicles. Enhancements, again, rather lackluster, though I think the stratagems are actually not bad, they're just not great. Enhancement highlights, Necromechanic, fantastic, and stratagem highlights, Motive Imperative, Machine Spirit Resurgent, Machine Superiority, and Transcendent Cognition, all ones that I could see a significant bit of use. And let's move on to data sheets, starting with Belisarius Cawl, the sort of big man of the AdMech. What a leader he is. Sadly, not that great going forward. So in a lot of ways he has stayed the same. Now his ability to choose one of 3 abilities, they have changed slightly. So Innovation of Machine Vengeance, which friendly AdMech within 6 inches reroll hit rolls of 1. Large same as before, though I believe before it was actually just ranged. The Mantra of Discipline, which is an aura, friendly AdMech units within 6 inches add 1 to their leadership and battle shock tests. Fine. And then Shroud Sam aura, friendly AdMech units within 6 inches have the benefit of cover against ranged attacks. So, what does this mean? Shroud Sam going from stealth to benefit of cover is worse, except for the Skitarii cohort one, because they have stealth, so again this on top is actually a bit of a benefit. But overall just seems to not be as ideal, because in a lot of games you can get the benefit of cover if you are using terrain a lot. If you're not, then this might be useful. But just having stealth was probably better, except for one detachment. So with that, I feel just something feels a little bit lost here. And then ultimately I just don't feel he's as impactful as you want to be. The Solar Automatizer, which I think is just not reliable enough. It should either be 24 inches, so you can get quite impactful across the boards, notably, or it should be flat 3 shots, but simply, if he's going to be a utility and ranged character, though he's no slouch in combat either, the ranged ability, the ranged combat, the ranged gun should be just a bit more reliable and a bit more impactful, and then his abilities are fine, but not great, and probably for his cost, is going to make him really difficult to justify. I love Cawl, what a model. We're just going to have to see if his cost does reflect the fact that he is quite lackluster. Priest Dominus, and again, this one is actually very much largely unchanged. You're still getting the Lord of the Machine cult rule, which is I think one of its main benefits, is that you're getting the 5+ Feel No Pain, or if it's Electro-Priest, it's 4+. So if you're thinking of leader and adding survivability, the Tech Priest Dominus fulfills that role. And on the other end of actual survivability, we have the Tech Priest Enginseer. Now, they're more designed to protect your vehicles, and the Omniscient Blessing has changed a little bit, in that your command phase select an Adeptus Mechanicus model within 3 inches, the model regains D3 lost wounds, and if it's a vehicle, gains Feel No Pain until the next command phase. Changing from giving a vehicle a 4-up invul to 5-up Feel No Pain is a huge improvement, really good, you like to see it. Several vehicles already had invul saves, so it's felt a little bit redundant. I think it's going to be quite good on a backfield objective, possibly with a Dune Crawler or something quite difficult to bring down, and your opponent may get hurt by it and then focus fire on it, but that 5-up Feel No Pain will keep it going. So I think in that regard, quite a good unit in on itself. No one really minded about the vengeance for the Omniscient. I think it's a cool rule personally, but not really the unit that is going to be wanting to go into combat straight away themselves. And on to leader enhancing damage, we have the Tech Priest Manipulus, again largely unchanged. Now does give the lethal hits, which is very good for adding damage, And I suppose that's a bit of survivability in that once per battle you can give your unit a 4-up invul save until the end of the phase, so there can be one time where you know it's going to come, it's going to hurt, then you go with that to try and survive a little bit longer. Again, this would be your damage dealing enhancer one, and again not bad with lethal hits. And our next character is the Technoarcheologist, and again largely unchanged here, so you know what you're getting. I like the idea possibly of putting them along with Vanguard units so that you can basically overwhelm an objective, because the amount of bodies in the OC will be quite high, and considering they also reduce objective control makes it very hard. You basically have to wipe the unit to get control of that objective. And equally they do have the ability to stop reinforcements within a certain area. Very handy if your opponent has got, I think it's Inceptors for Space Marines. I use them quite a lot. They come in and they can do 3 inches and they can fire in with bolters and plasma. Really great unit, and I'd be curious if we actually see more units and armies get that kind of ability, because it is so useful. You can't charge, but it really helps those backfield units that you're trying to hide get eliminated. So you might use him to try and stop your opponent having as much of an area to deep strike or come in reserve in that case. And we have our new stealth unit within the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex, and that's the Sydonian Skatros, which is move 8, toughness 4, wounds 4, leadership 7, OC 1, save 4, and invul 5+. Has Mechanicus Pistol, Radium Giselle, Skatros Transonic Arquebus, and also has its Sydonian feat. Now in terms of rules, Doctrine Imperative, Lone Operative, Stealth, and cannot be the Warlords. Dread Sniper, in your shooting phase, select one enemy unit hit by one or more of these attacks. They must take a battle shock test. And Achille and I, each time this unit attacks an infantry unit with Radium Giselle, you can reroll the wound roll. Each time this unit attacks a monster or vehicle with Skatros Transonic Arquebus, you can reroll the wound roll. So genuinely, I am struggling to see a reason why you should take the Skatros Transonic Arquebus. Love to know. I have absolutely zero idea, so let me know on that one, because it doesn't seem ideal at all. Radium Giselle has its use. That reroll wounds makes it more reliable to actually take out units, especially if one has a low armor save and no invul. Most likely to be able to get any sort of effect out of this, you're going to need more than one. And then you've also got the other problem, which is, why are you taking a Vindicator? If you are looking at an assassin, ranged one, they do the job exceptionally well. Really going to depend on points in this one to see what value you can get. I can see if they're cheap enough, you have 3 posted out around the field, and they just take pot shots at leaders and see what they can do. This unit is really going to be decided by points. I mean, a lot of them are, but I feel this new character's got a bit of pressure on them to see its value. Skitarii Marshal is again largely unchanged, so you do have that reroll all hits when he is leading a unit. Now, I can see some actual potential here. You'll see a combination with the Dunerider that you can possibly get quite a lot of rerolls here, and you might just bog down your opponent in dice. So there's the possibility it might be worth it, but again, the large are going to be decided on points. Once per turn where you can use the same stratagem twice is an okay ability, but it's just annoying it can't be free. That really does limit the actual use of it and the actual desire to use this ability. I'm a bit surprised that one. Obviously it would increase his points if you could make it free, but equally his usefulness would go up significantly as well. Next up we have battle line units, starting with the Skitarii Rangers. Again, largely unchanged. I know their index, they did change the armor value and invul, that is reflected here. But really you do have their special ability of objective markers stay under your control. Now, I do think Vanguard are looking a little bit more prioritised here and a little bit better just for pushing up the field, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having, say, Rangers on the backfield. They stick the objective and then maybe move on forward. Just in case you're not playing the backfield for whatever reason, you're not holding your objective. Handy way to do so. Just find it very interesting when it comes to Rangers. They've got the Scout 6, yet I'm sort of inclined to keep them back just to stick the objective to begin with at the start of the game. Interesting unit, but again, I am also disappointed that you can't specialise the unit by having one of the specialist weapons just be the weapon that it's actually using. You've got to take one of each. I really am disappointed by that change, because that gave this unit a lot more specialty, a lot more use, that you knew the weapons, not all of them, but some of them were going to fulfill a job. And on to Vanguard, who are again largely unchanged, though I do actually quite like them now, just with how the detachment rules have changed and some of the units have changed their interactions. I think this is quite a valuable unit. Now, you're maybe not playing for damage, but then again, in a lot of this codex, you are struggling for damage. The utility of them is quite good. We're seeing that people are interested now in taking transports with units and then plonking them on objectives and trying to fight it out, or at least try and be the one that controls them. Now, Skitarii Vanguard do have their ability to lower the objective control characteristics of enemy models, which is great. And generally there is a few interactions where they can do a wee bit of damage themselves. Probably not significant, but still a wee bit in on themselves. So I think there's some viable options here. We'll see the cost of them and probably the Dunerider as well to determine how good they are. Next up we have Kataphron Breachers, and I'm pleased to say they're largely unchanged and still pretty solid, which the AdMech players will be happy to hear. Necrons sort of wish some of their units did not get changed, and different things are possibly going to be used, but if you bought Breachers in mass, I think you're still going to see some use out of them. So their heavy arc rifle has had a reduction range, I think it's only 30 inches now. Still absolutely solid range on that one. So it has a good bit of damage potential, retains good toughness. Generally also a fantastic ability as well, and Doctrina imperatives. So I'd say in the Data Slam detachment, rule further rewards them if you're within half range, because you get your Rapid Fire 2 as well. So you get that extra ability. You've got your Rapid Fire 2 and the Data Slam detachment ability on it. So being a bit more aggressive with them moving forward might also be an option. Generally though, I've actually think I got 6 of these kicking about that I've never ever used, and now they have finally became viable, so maybe it's time to look out some of my own Kataphron Breachers. And we have Kataphron Destroyers, who again, largely unchanged, which means they're a bit overshadowed by the Breachers. Now, they do retain their Overwatch, well, their stratagem, their ability to use the Overwatch stratagem when they hit on 5+. Fine. And I suppose the highlight here is that you can overwhelm your opponent with Kataphron Plasma Culverin Superchargers. 36 inches and 4 shots piece, meaning that you are looking at 24 shots per unit. Now, one thing to bear in mind, if you roll 1s on your Hazardous, you die. And as far as I'm aware, there's no way to actually stop Hazardous for this codex. So they do have that danger there because they are infantry, that they would end up just melting away if you rolled a bunch of 1s on Hazardous. But 24 shots at a full squad, they will delete. I suppose if you're looking at like sort of Space Marine infantry, damage 2 will absolutely annihilate them. So it is something worth considering. High AP as well. But I think just when it comes to the Breachers, we have already been a bit overshined by them. But it is something worth considering. Corpuscarii Electro-Priests, and these guys have changed quite a wee bit, mainly in their special ability. In your shooting phase, after this unit is shot, select an enemy unit, excluding monsters or vehicles, hit by one or of these attacks. Till the end of your opponent's next turn, the enemy unit is shot. While shot, subtract 2 from movement characteristics and subtract 2 from advance and charge rolls made for them as well. So this makes them quite a good harasser unit. Now they actually work out really well with the data slate, they call it mechanical detachment, and they work out quite well there. But generally I think maybe in other ones they will do quite well as well. Certainly for slow armies like Death Guard, I've played them, where if I've had any amount of my movement reduced, it is impactful. I move murderously slow and it's just a pain. So slowing down a unit will just be very impactful. I could personally see myself using them in Duneriders 2 up, get them up the field, and then just slowing down units, slowing down those ones. Your opponent will get frustrated, maybe actually target them when there's other units they should be targeting. They've already done their job, slow down a unit, and even if one survives, then you can still slow down a unit another turn, which is absolutely excellent. I'm surprised you actually didn't roll for it to see if they actually got slowed down. Really interesting unit. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some of these just used for utility to distract your opponent and cause them a little bit of something to think about, because slowing down units really can be quite painful. And then we have the Fulgurite Electro-Priests, and these ones are relatively unchanged. So what I would say is that, yeah, not bad if you have Dominus around with them. They're going 4+, feel no pain. But overall, I just find them a very fragile unit that even, needed a way to enhance their dev wounds to activate. If you got that on a 5+, then it's something worth considering. Now, in the Data Slam Conclave, they are actually a bit better. If you choose the one where it is combat, then you're adding 1 to their strength and attack characteristics. Suddenly they're strength 7 and 3 attack speed on a 10-man squad. That might hit hard. They're a bit low on the AP side, but they are damage 2 and a few dev wounds. Depending on their points here, there will be some to consider, because you might need some infantry to actually fight off on objectives. It's all good having ones that are utility, hard to move off, or distractions. Sometimes you do need a wee bit of power. I don't think the Fulgurite Priests are quite power yet. If you do data sound Conclave, they will definitely benefit a lot from the combat version. Sicarian Infiltrators have seen quite a bit of a change here, so they've got voices in the code. At the start of the fight phase, each enemy unit with an engagement range of 1 or more units with this ability must take a Battleshock test. And Neurostatic Interface, which is an aura ability, while an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this unit. Each time Battleshock or a leadership test is taken for that unit, subtract 1 from that test, while this unit is within 6 inches of 1 or more friendly Adeptus Mechanicus Battleline unit, subtract 2 from the test instead. So, Infiltrators begin a bit interesting that side. You are using them for debuffs. Now, you obviously have your Rad Core detachment. You could just throw try and use these to constantly cause your opponent to fail at least one battle shock test. Early ability to get onto objectives, though we do have a number of units that are fast, can get on objectives. You can essentially just deploy these guys there. A bit difficult to take out with stealth. Yeah, there is certainly a bit of potential when it comes to Infiltrators. I think they're going to be one you're going to have to play smart with to get the most out of them, because I don't see them the most damage dealing. But if you play them smart, they'll actually do quite well. Whether that is stopping your opponent's stratagems, whether them stop them scoring. Certainly when it comes to either of them, those are huge things that are impactful. When it works out well, these guys will be in support for that. And next we have Ruststalkers, and again, I don't think they have changed quite significantly, and that's probably for their detriment. So they have low weapon skill, which really reduces. Having a 4-up is just not ideal, and there's not so many ways you can improve weapon skill. There's rerolls, but not so much for weapon skill. The devastating wounds is fine, but with the weapon skill being low, it just means not many of them are hitting, and then they're actually just low damage as well, which is not ideal. Anti-infantry 3 is great, to ensure wounds, but they don't have dev wounds on them except for the Princep, who does have the sort of dev wound and the anti-infantry 3. Great combination, just not up together for the other guys. They've got to choose either dev wounds or they've got to choose anti-infantry 3, which is a bit hurtful. If they could just improve in one of the areas, their accuracy improves, their anti-infantry combined with dev wounds or a higher damage, then yes, this unit might have worked out. But it just seems they're just middling to poor on all of these things, that they're just coming out overall poor. And next we have, is it the Pteraxii or Pteraxii? Is the P silent? I've heard it might be silent. Anyway, let's say the Skystalkers. So I believe in Law of Guards here, they're largely unchanged. They do have their sort of move after shooting ability. You're really taking these guys for deep striking. They're high movement and the ability to cross the board. And then they can move after they shoot, just to keep up mobility, which is fantastic in on itself. But they are not, they're quite easy to kill themselves, and they don't really do so much damage themselves either. We do have a lot of utility units in this codex. I think they are fine, but I think they're going to be overshadowed by just other units that do similar things, not the same, but similar, and a bit more useful as well. And on to the Sterylizors next. Now, they have changed a wee bit in essence that they actually are, their abilities now focused towards damage. So they have each time model in this unit makes an attack with a phosphor torch that targets an enemy unit within range of an objective marker. Reroll a wound roll of 1. If this unit is also within 6 inches of 1 or more friendly Adeptus Mechanicus Battleline units, each time such an attack targets such a unit, you can reroll the wound roll instead. So an interesting unit on this side as well. You can deep strike them in, they've got huge movement, really good for getting them into the right position. With their ability, probably good at clearing away chaff units, ones that maybe your Vanguard want to get removed from an objective, get close enough to contest it, but not close enough to end up in engagement range, and have these just burn them away, in which case you are quite possibly going to get that extra bit of damage, because you might get the full rerolls on wounds, which would be really good. Though if the opponent is on the objective, then you're at least getting that reroll wound rolls of 1. Keep in mind, if you are thinking about targeting your enemy's backfield unit on their objective and you're in Conqueror, then they would also be AP -1. Also keep in mind that Overwatch is really strong as well, and just with these torches that would be quite good. So if you're facing anything with an armor value, this might not be such an ideal unit, but there will be certain units that are a bit lighter and do need to be cleared away, and this unit could fulfill that use quite well. On to possibly my favourite looking unit in the Adeptus Mechanicus range, and it's the Serberys Raiders. So again, these are a unit that is largely unchanged. They're not really going to do so much damage, though they will get the occasional devastating wound off, but really with their firepower, you're only really concentrating on the weaker units. One thing they do have is they do have Scout 9 inches with 12 inch movement. That means turn 1 you're clearing 21 inches up the board. So that can be used in a number of ways. So you could possibly block off enemy movement, you get turn 1, you march up there straight into your opponent's face. That'll frustrate them, they might have to go round, they might have to stop a unit from moving forward, say it doesn't have fly so it can't utilise its speed as well. Just really to block off areas that are a bit annoying for your opponent, or just get onto objectives early. Again, Serberys Raiders are probably a utility unit and one you've got to work with well. There are plenty of them, as you might be seeing now within the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex. I'd say this one because it doesn't offer sort of reliable damage as well. It's not one of the highest priority ones, but certainly being able to have that reliable, if you get turn 1 move on and move into your opponent's face, that can be quite ideal. And we then have the Sulphurhounds. So this unit has changed in that the model needs to be within engagement range to score the mortal wound now. I think in the past it just needed to be the unit needed to be within engagement range, now it's the actual model. So it's notable that when it comes to Raiders, they have the Scouts, so they're going to move up the board a bit quicker, or at least sooner. But these guys seem to be better for a little bit more damage dealing. They have a lot of pistol ability, so they can fire in combat, but they can also charge in and cause some mortal wounds. I think if you are going to play Mass Vanguard, have them around the midfield, you can possibly use these guys to charge in, cause some mortal wounds on some units your opponent maybe doesn't want to, and then some light shots on them as well. They can do a bit of damage, maybe not the most, but I think they are a unit that, depending on cost, might play quite well. Just go along with battle line units and just shove some damage in places. Could be helpful on that side. Cybernetica Datasmith, and they have sort of fixed the Kastelan Robots with the infantry keywords part there, just because, well, there was a few issues with that when it did come to having infantry inside a unit that didn't have infantry as part of it, so they have seen that, taken that into consideration. And again, they are largely probably weighed on how useful is the Kastelan Robots itself, and so I think this unit will be largely decided by that. They probably don't offer enough in terms of their battle protocols, certainly to what they used to be in the past, but it'll be interesting because the Kastelan Robots really sort of define how useful this is. I suppose its main advantage is obviously its ability, but you can also take enhancements on it, which might be something to consider if you are using Kastelan Robots. And we then now move on to Kastelan Robots themselves. So they have changed slightly that there is an extra AP on the Kastelan / Twin Phosphor Blasters, which is fine to have a little bit more on it. It should have been there in the first place. But again, it's just not hard hitting enough, and it's not reliable enough, which is probably the two main issues here. Even in melee, where even if you could use the ability from the Datasmith to up its amount of attacks, again you're hitting on 4+. That's not ideal, you are missing half of your attacks. So they're just not reliable. Now, they are tough, but there's now other things within the Codex that are probably as tough, if not tougher. That used to be the kind of thing, is that they had huge amount of volume of shots, and they were super hard to bring down, being quite a pain there. And even when they're in combat, they were just quite a bullet unit there. They just feel expensive, they're not hitting hard enough in shooting, they're unreliable and when they're swinging into combat. And they're just expensive, and their survivability, I'd probably say, is not as impressive as it used to be, and they're slow. So it just seems to be a lot of, yeah, they used to be able to do things well, but now things have sort of caught up with them, and even then, the things that they did do well aren't very good anymore, and they still stay at that place, and their points usually are quite high. So now to define it, they really need to reflect that the fact that their stats are not great, and we'll see how much in terms of cost will they be worth it. But really, Kastelan Robots have had a sort of a long fall from their glory days, which is quite unfortunate. And we have Ironstrider Ballistarii. So these have changed a wee bit in that they can now shoot in the turn in which they fell back or advanced. and you can also reroll your Desperate Escape test for models in this unit. So you can no longer charge in the turn that they fell back, but I don't know if that's a bad thing because you can now advance and shoot all the time. And that is very helpful for the Ironstrider Ballistarii, just to keep up their impressive movement, move into certain positions, and possibly take some pot shots. I'd probably say they're quite good in terms of board control. They are huge of these sort of oval bases, and they just generally move fast, so you can get onto objectives, you can block off opponent from being able to move to a certain area, you know, just as a key unit, and then suddenly they've got 3 Ironstriders Ballistaries in front of them, and say it's a unit that doesn't hit very hard, you could possibly shoot, then charge, they're stuck in a bit of protracted combat, then later on you can actually fall back, shoot, you wouldn't be able to charge after that. But you get the idea that you can actually play around with some of your opponent's units that maybe don't want to actually be in engagement range of any unit. They are also relatively tough, now they do have toughness 7 and good 7 wounds. 7 wounds, really nice place to be. A lot of things now have d6 plus 1 damage. I mean, these guys do, for instance, but it still does mean that even 6 damage stuff won't finish them off instantly, which is always really good. I think they're useful also as backfield unit. You know, you take some of them in a unit, they can benefit from certain enhancements or stratagems a bit more than some of the other units, and that allows them to get through a few last cannon shots. It is very unfortunate that when it came to the twin Cognis last cannon and autocannon, you went down in shots, though you gained a bit of, you know, usefulness in terms of twin link to sustained hits 1. But I just think, depending on their cost, they will be a good bit of harassment unit. Get some extra firepower, they're fast, they're big bulky areas, and they have a decent bit of survivability. So it'll be interesting to see where the Ironstriders land in the going forward. And then the Dragoons have seen a bit of a change themselves. Now they've got 2 different profiles, one with Lances and one with their Radium Giselles. And I think overall that was a good choice, but we'll get into that in a bit in a minute. In terms of the Lances, I suppose you're taking similar to what the Ironstriders are in a way as well, is that if you are really going for bullying the sort of midfield, Dragoons are going to be probably a little bit more ideal for that position. Reason being is that they can contribute more in damage and melee if needed. The advantage for them is that they can declare charge in a turn in which they advanced or fell back, which is a huge amount of mobility which they can offer, so that is a real good part there. You can also give the unit 5 up feel no pain through stratagem, which is absolutely great, making them a pain to shift. Overall, they've got decent toughness, they've got decent speeds, they can, you know, essentially with their big bases, they can block out areas, and they can contribute to damage in combat. Not as reliably because you are forced to hit, but in the past you really wanted force to sort of get off your extra amount of attacks through stratagems. That's not really a place now, you really are looking for those 6s, but you have Lance as well in there, you have Anti-Walker 2+. Simply put, they can cause damage, but they've also got the other areas that matter as well. So I could see a huge amount of potential when it comes to Sydonian Dragoons. Big unit for me, I absolutely love Dragoons. I had a massive unit. I think it used to be able to field them in 6, now it's only 3, but I still see plenty of reasons why to bring these guys along. We now have the Giselle variants for the Sydonian Dragoons. I think it's a good idea to separate these 2 units out. Not often do you see that the fact that they're willing to split out war gear, but sometimes it happens, and I think in this area is good because the special ability really just would not have worked between the unit depending on the war gear, so having split out and their ability being different probably brings them a bit of use to each one that was sorely needed. Now in terms of their ability, they have Focused Hunters, which at the start of the battle selects 1 unit from your opponent's army to the end of the battle. Each time a model in this unit makes an attack that targets that unit, you can reroll the hit roll. So this kind of contends with Skatros for the ranged precision when you're targeting maybe leader units. So what I'd say is that if there's maybe a unit you needed to bring down, possibly, then these guys might be quite helpful. You know, they have the heavy precision, reroll hits against preferred 1 anti-infantry. All that could help on that side as well, but I just feel when it comes to damage dealing, there's probably better units. If you are playing ranged precision, I don't know which one will frankly be better. The Giselles probably have the toughness, but the Skatros probably has the actual lone operative word, so they make it harder for them to target. You've also got the Vindicator to contend with as well, which is always a viable option on there as well. I'd probably say it's actually also good for having as a backfield unit, so say it's one that you want to activate some of your secondaries, You can send him back there if he's cheap enough and just try and activate some secondaries on that side as well. So I think Point's going to decide this one. I don't see it as a great unit. I just think the damage dealing will come in other areas. Whether it will be my ranged precision unit of choice, I'm not sure yet. I'm leaning more towards the Skatros and possibly even Vindicator on that side as well. But yeah, I think it's a good idea that they had to separate this unit out at least. Skorpius Disintegrator next, and a bit of an interesting one. It hasn't changed really that much. You've still got your Belarus Energy Cannon that targets infantry, +1 to it, and if it's Thermite Cannon, it's +1 to it against monsters and vehicles. Largely the same, still tough, and I suppose its biggest help is that it does have ranged indirect fire, which there isn't so much in this codex. So if there is a unit that is, you know, in the backfield that you're just struggling to find, this unit can possibly try and do some shots on it. The only thing I'd say in that regard is that we have a number of utility units that might be able to move really fast and get into those back areas. So how useful that is, I'm not entirely sure. And also when it comes to actually firing at, say, monsters' vehicles, we do have a number of options there as well to consider. So I think more than anything else, this one's going to come down to cost, because it's offering, in terms of damage, similar things to what others can do, except for the indirect fire. That is pretty unique to it. So if it proves to be expensive, then it might be just it's going to be overcosted on that side. I don't know yet. And that'll be a large part to define it. At the moment, I would say that I'm still inclined towards other units that maybe might be taking out tougher units, because that is an important part of the PubSec Codex. Signing your Codex, you've got to think about sort of your monsters and vehicles. This can do well. Certainly there is good, but there is just a lot of other areas, and you've also got to think sometimes you are just playing more for utility than damage, depending on what you're using. So yeah, I just think it was really going to be down to cost on this one. We'll see what's going forward, but largely the same. If you like these before, you'll still like them going forward. Skorpius Dunerider next has taken a bit of a change, and that's got fire support. So in the shooting phase, after a model has shot, select one enemy unit it's scored one or more of its hits against. Until the end of the phase, each time a friendly model that has disembarked from this transport this turn makes attack that targets that enemy unit, you can reroll the wound roll. So it's an exchange this sort of being able to take away the advance and then drop units off, though there was limitations with it, to being able to reroll wounds if they target all of the same unit. So when it comes to this meta at the moment, it appears that transports are really going up a wee bit in people's views, so you might see a lot of usefulness there. The Corpuscarii Electro-Priests would be handy to go along, and they can drown your opponents in wounds or at least slow them down. And then again with the Vanguard and Marshal combo, you're really looking at reroll hits and all wounds with anti-entry 4+ if they use the fire support. That could be very, very helpful. It's very interesting when it comes to Dunerider. You know, I didn't think transports were going to become the thing, but apparently they are becoming quite useful again. And I can certainly see them, along with a few units here, being quite useful if you are playing the objective game. Then yeah, Dunerider might be it for you. On to the iconic Onager Dunecrawler. So in terms of differences, I don't think its weapons have changed, though there is a lot of weapons on this thing. But its ability has changed, which has now got the Imaginatus Force Field, which is, while friendly Adeptus Mechanicus battle line model is wholly within 6 inches of this model. That battle line model has a 4-up invul save against ranged attacks. So interesting there, it does say that it has to be model, not a unit, so something to consider there when you are dealing out sort of the damage a unit is getting. But I think it's a bit of an improvement on that side as well. So I'd quite like this maybe in the backfield with Kataphrons and Rangers. Rangers giving the rerolls to the Kataphrons, and the Onagers protecting the Rangers by giving them the 4-up invul. That might be sort of my idea of having a backfield there. Possibly another unit that would work as a singular unit to just roll its activations, though you could argue the Rangers could probably do that as well. And try and score some secondary objectives if any of them need to be on my backfield objective marker, depending on my choice. But yeah, I like the Dunecrawler. I think it's not bad. It's got plenty of weapons there to choose from. It's hard to get excited about them when you are ballistic skill 4+, but there is things to try and make that a little bit better. It does come native with heavy on, of course, its neutron laser. So if you are staying still, it's going to be that bit more accurate. Imagine you had ballistic skill 3, then it would be 2s to hit, and that would be amazing with stats like that. 2 shots hitting on 2s with strength 16 minus 4 d6 plus 1. Oh, would be great. But I suppose when you are 3s to hit, if you stay still, have Cawl nearby, so you're rerolling 1s, that might be something to consider as well. We finally come to some of the flyers. We have the Architopter, oh, I'm not going to pronounce it well, Fusillade, which has taken a bit of change, and now that activates its mortal wounds on 4s rather than 3s, arguably making it worse. Only really by one less mortal wound. This might do okay if it's targeting weaker units. You know, you've got a high volume amount of shots and you can throw some mortal wounds. But simply put, you've got other units that can do that trick-wise as well. This isn't really going to be playing for the board. Possibly good if you're going to target things that you just can't quite get a line of sight of. You can maybe fly over and blast them. That could work as well. Very, very selective on that one. So there is a bit of a roll on that one, though I don't know if this is maybe the unit to go for as the bomber. You might be better with the other one, or one of the other flyers. But simply put, if you use this before, it's going to be largely the same, just a little bit less effective. The Stratoraptor is largely unchanged as well. I feel in terms of it being a damage dealer, again, largely not as impactful. It's a bit more difficult because it's going down in terms of the amount of shots you're getting with the Cognis Heavy Stubbers, but you are getting other shots in other areas as well. It does have the ability of strafe and run, which is quite useful on that side as well. I think this is mainly going to be used if you are looking to target things that are just very, very difficult to find. They are just really well hidden. The Stratoraptor might be able to get you into position to target them. Just depends how efficient you are with using flyers. So again, similar, if you're using this before, you'll probably be using this again. But I just think there's other units when it comes to using your points effectively. Ones that are probably more deserving. And last we come to the Transvector, which does have a number of interesting abilities. It obviously has Deep Strike, it has the Hover, and it has Aerial Deployment, so it can come in from Strategic Reserve if it's in Hover mode in the first turn. I just don't think that AdMech in general have the units that really want to be able to do that. Or at least in essence, not the Skitarii Infantry and Tech Priest Infantry. You might want to prefer just to take a Dune Rider, ride up to objectives, and the Dune Rider can at least help on trying to control the objectives. The Transvector, not so much, so it's not really ideal for that purpose. It gets you where you need to be, but then it's not offering as much going forward. I think that's where the Dune Rider maybe actually propels itself a bit more forward. And that's it for my review when it comes to Adeptus Mechanicus. So covering all the detachments there and the rules in terms of the datasheets. What are my overall thoughts? Overall, I think it's a large improvement for the AdMech. Beforehand, they were just, it's mainly the detachment rule was just not offering nearly as much. Now you actually have a few playstyles and a few things to think about. Their actual datasheets could have used a bit of a tune-up there. There was some changes which helped and some that didn't. I just feel that, again, they are not hitting as accurately, not hitting as impactfully, is really affecting the AdMech. But they do have a number of tools to actually play a lot of different types of playstyles. So I'd say it's gone from an army. In the past, it has been that you can reliably cause a heck of amount of damage. Now they've gone to a certain area where you're not going to be playing damage, you are going to be playing the mission in a lot of ways, and that'll be the best way for you to possibly win. Anyway, there is a few key units. I do think I'm actually quite happy with Breachers still being up there, mainly because I know a lot of people have bought them, and that they've still got that as a worthy investment, so that's good. So I'm very interested to hear what people have to say when it comes to AdMech. Have I been a little bit more lenient on them, and that maybe they're still just not there, that maybe I should have been a little bit harsher on what they've got? Or maybe have you seen that there is a glimmer of hope for AdMech, and maybe there's some areas I've missed? Put it in the comments, I'd like to hear from you below. So thanks again, please comment, share, like and subscribe, and we'll see you on another Tabletop Assault Battle Report.